It all starts with a surprised young man, Yu Ilhan, who is walking around without noticing anyone. He arrives at his university, but there are no traces of students or professors. His classroom is empty, the cafeteria and other areas are the same, so he decides to leave. As he continues walking, he finds it strange and thinks, how strange, I am the only person in the school. Later, we see the protagonist walking again because he was waiting for the bus, but it never arrived. He continues to think that everything is too quiet and changes his mind to just wanting to go home and sleep. When he gets home, he calls his mother, but no one answers, and he becomes worried. He looks at the clock and realizes that something strange is happening because it is still 2:45, the same time as when he left for school. He quickly checks his phone and sees that it is also 2:45. He realizes that the sun is in the same place and says, "It's like time has stood still, except for me." Someone behind the protagonist responds, "That's right." Suddenly, beautiful and gigantic wings appear. It was an angel with long blonde hair, beautiful shoes, a tight dress, beautiful gems, and a perfect body. She was white as snow and tells him that time on earth has stopped, except for him. Yu Ilhan is amazed and scared and asks who she is. She laughs and thinks that if he doesn't realize who she is, the protagonist stays quiet for a few moments and only responds that she is an intruder. She gets upset and tells him that if he still doesn't understand, what does he think a person with wings and a white dress could be? The protagonist thinks for a few moments and responds that she is a cosplayer. She almost loses her patience and clears her throat, telling him that she is an emissary of God, an angel, and her name is Lida. The reason for her presence is that she has come to visit him because he is alone. He has been left behind. When Yu Ilhan hears those words, he puts on an incredulous face and has a flashback. We see him as a child on his first excursion when he is left by the bus. As a teenager, on a training retreat, the bus also leaves him behind. On a high school math field trip, he also misses the bus, and finally, he is late for the university entrance exam. Returning to the present, we see Yu Ilhan lying on the ground, desolate, thinking that he has always been left behind, always forgotten. Lida explains to him with great joy that all humans have been sent to another dimension except for him, Yu Ilhan. With tears in his eyes, he wants to know why this has happened. Lida explains that the Earth is going through a cataclysm. As a teacher, she tells him that a cataclysm means that the Earth has leveled up to the next stage since it has reached the maximum number of experience points, which means that the mana has been released. Therefore, an archaic recoding will take place, which is finally called the state. From everything Lida said, the protagonist didn't understand anything and sarcastically tells her that if that is a simple explanation. Lida continues her explanation, saying that when the mana is released on Earth, many monsters will appear that can be destroyed with common weapons. If humans were left as they were, they would be annihilated with the arrival of the monsters. Therefore, God had stopped time on Earth and sent all humans to another world so that they could train and adapt to the mana. In fact, the real bodies are being kept in a safe place, and their spirits have been sent to the other plane so that humanity can learn to use mana in a different world and have a chance to defend themselves against future monsters. After the explanation, the protagonist asks if the monsters cannot be destroyed with more powerful weapons. But Lida tells him that the monsters are formed by high-level energy, and not even a nuclear missile can destroy them. For this reason, it was necessary for humans to become stronger. She reminds him that God is a merciful being who has helped humanity learn to use mana, but Yu Ilhan interrupts her and asks what happened to him. Lida simply replies that she thinks there was a mistake. The protagonist tells her to rectify the mistake, but Lida explains that nothing can be done. However, since God is a merciful being and since they have left him behind, he has decided to give him a reward. Yu Ilhan, crying, only explains that what he wants is to be sent to the other plane like the others to learn how to use mana. Lida tells him that it cannot be done and that he will have to wait for the cataclysm to occur. Humanity will take 10 years to return to Earth, but he shouldn't worry because she will take care of his food. Yu Ilhan, still crying like a baby, asks her what he will do alone during that time. Lida tells him not to worry, that he will use that time to train his body to prepare for the cataclysm. Frustrated and crying, he comments that if the cataclysm occurs, what can he do if he doesn't know how to use mana? With great enthusiasm and motivation, Lida tells him that he only needs to prepare himself physically to be stronger. And this is how Yu Ilhan tells us about how he started his solitary life on Earth. It has been 5 years since Lida's conversation with Yu Ilhan, and we can see different countries and cities all abandoned. Then we see the protagonist who has gained muscle mass, exercising and training heavily, because he could only work on his physical strength, while the rest of the people were practicing with mana to be able to develop the necessary powers to resist the attack of future monsters. Now we see Lita sitting next to Yuilhan, asking him if he gets bored doing the same thing every day during these years. He responds while still exercising that he has no other choice, that she had told him to prepare for the worst. Lita realizes that the protagonist's muscles have developed over time. She also sees that his strength has increased and that he is a very patient person. Then she tells Yuilhan that she really thinks he is an extraordinary person who even managed to avoid the eyes of God with his stealth techniques. The protagonist, annoyed, complains that then they left him because of her fault, but Lita just laughs. She was the only person our protagonist could talk to on Earth. She visited him once a week, but she made sure to prepare his delicious meals, which he thought tasted better than his mom's. And every time he finished eating, the dishes magically disappeared. When the protagonist had developed his physical state, he decided to start learning martial arts or using some weapons. Lita asked him how he was going to learn if he was alone. Then he replied that he would learn using the internet. Of course, the question was how there was still electricity and internet if there was no one. The answer is because time had stopped. Over time, Yuilhan improved his techniques in the use of weapons, and after 4 years, Lita told him that it was time to practice with her, that with an opponent he could perhaps improve much faster, to which Yuilhan replied that how could he hit an angel, that he would not hesitate to hit her for being alone for 9 years. And with all the anger he had, he tried to hit the angel, but she left his face bruised and bleeding with a slight punch. And so the promised 10 years passed. We see Lita congratulating him because he had the necessary skills to defeat low-level monsters. She also suggested that if he leveled up, he could learn to use mana, and that she could even be his teacher. She said that the positive thing is that when the cataclysm came, many things would change and everything would improve. They said their goodbyes, but before leaving, he asked her if they would see each other again, and she only responded that it would depend on what he did. Later we see the protagonist in a sports field, waiting for the appearance of people, thinking that he had not seen anyone in a long time. He was very nervous and anxious. From the heavens, Lita watched him. While waiting, the protagonist thought only of seeing people again, and that his life would be normal. However, seconds, minutes, hours passed, and no one appeared. The protagonist asked Lita what had happened, why no one had arrived, and she, with a shameful laugh, said that perhaps there had been a mistake. Frustrated, we see the protagonist crying on the ground, inconsolable, thinking that the calculation of time was wrong and that he would have to wait for 10 or 20 more years. Then, giving himself encouragement, the protagonist accepts that he can wait for 10 more years. However, the years passed, 10, 20, until 50 years had passed, but the people never arrived. We see Yuilhan, who has remained ageless, practicing martial arts. Lita congratulates him because he has become much stronger and more skilled than she thought. She sees that he is a bit discouraged and asks him why he feels that way. He explains that he no longer remembers his mother's face and that he is bored of martial arts. Lita explains that he cannot stop practicing because the cataclysm could happen at any moment. She asks him what he plans to do, and he says not to worry, that he will continue training but will also read books. She congratulates him and thinks it's a good idea. So, he starts reading all kinds of books, from novels to business books, geography, and general knowledge. After he had read all the books in the library, he decides to start learning languages. And so, Yuilhan's adventure begins as he travels the world, learning several languages and reading all the books he can find, from the East to Africa. Finally, he manages to read all the books from the places he traveled to around the world. Lita admires him and asks if he has gotten tired, but he responds enthusiastically that he doesn't have time to be tired. He still has things to do to prepare for the great cataclysm, and despite the time that has passed, he still has faith that people will return, and everything is preparation for the great cataclysm. Moments later we see Lita praying to God, asking him to please bring back humans before Yuilhan reaches his limit and loses faith. And so many more years pass, and we see Yuilhan hunting a wild boar, since after reading all the books in the world, he started learning about butchery and blacksmithing. He wondered what would happen if he killed all the animals in the world, but Lita only told him to hunt the animals she allowed so as not to upset the balance of the world. 274 years have passed since Yuilhan was left alone. Lita thinks that it is a long time even for an angel, and she is surprised to see how a human has lived so long, preparing for an uncertain future. 300 years have passed, and he has completed his butchery skill. He is now focused on learning and mastering blacksmithing techniques, hitting himself many times and making many weapons that break easily. It took him about 5 years to make his first sword, which turned out to be beautiful but could not cut anything. Lita took that sword as a memento. Over time, he made all kinds of weapons, starting with daggers, spears, swords, axes, and hammers. 50 years have passed, but the protagonist, despite all the time that has passed, does not lose faith and continues to seek to learn new things. 100 years have passed, and finally, he made a perfect spear. Lita, increasingly amazed, saw that despite the time that has passed, Yu Ilhan is a persistent person who does not give up easily. Having mastered butchery and blacksmithing, he decided to return to martial arts, perfecting his technique and increasing his strength even more. Lita thought that 1,000 years had passed and that at some point Yu Ilhan would eventually reach his limit of learning everything. She was worried and thought that he had to experience something. She thought about awakening his feelings, but she felt bad because she thought those were vulgar things. After thinking for a while, she still decided to approach the protagonist, almost kissing him. But he interrupted her, telling her that her sword had been moving very strangely. Suddenly, the sword flew away, and Lita began to chase it, as she considered it a gift from the protagonist, and she couldn't lose it. At the same time, the protagonist's clothes began to change, and he appeared wearing the same clothes he had on when the Earth stopped. He realized that everything was returning to the day when the Earth stopped. While Lita was trying to catch the sword, she saw that the great cataclysm was beginning. The protagonist's body began to fly in another direction, and Lita was sad because they hadn't been able to say goodbye. She had grown fond of him during these 1,000 years. He was also sad that they hadn't been able to say goodbye and only remembered the first time they met, hoping to see her again. Gradually, humans begin to appear in all the places where they had disappeared, and we see Yu Ilhan, who has a status menu that shows his name, title, strength, health, abilities, and the level he was in. Then he realized that it was a status window, which meant that the day of the great cataclysm had come. All the people who were appearing were seeing their statuses and were very happy to have returned after 10 years. Yu Ilhan realized that no one was reacting to him, and he wondered how it was possible that they didn't see him until he read in his status menu, stealth ability, and got upset, thinking that he was destined to be alone. Feeling frustrated, he decided to go home, but he was happy to see people on the street again after such a long time. When he finally arrived home, he heard a voice calling his name. It was his mom, and he was finally able to see her again after so long. She was very happy and told him how much she had missed him. After a tight hug, they sat down to eat, and Yu Ilhan's dad was in the dining room reading the newspaper. Yu Ilhan thought that everything had returned to the way it was before. The conversation between his parents was about the places they had been, each telling their own experiences and how different it was to control mana. While the protagonist ate, his mom asked him where he had been, and he had a flashback of his training and the good times he had with Lita. Instead, he told her that he didn't remember where he had been. They talked about how to make money using mana since they would pay a lot of money for monster corpses. However, the protagonist interrupted them, saying that he couldn't use mana. His parents only told him not to worry and to focus on his studies. Yu Ilhan was happy that peace had returned to the world. Later, when he went to his room, he saw the last steel sword he had made and thought that when the world reset, his sword would disappear. He realized that Lita had done everything possible to help him keep his spear. When he held it, he made a movement with it, and the spear's menu opened, indicating that the weapon had a unique grade, an attack power of 800, and a durability of 500. It had been granted to him because it was the strongest weapon made by a human without mana. Minutes later, we see the protagonist searching for information on the internet, finding things about what is needed to attack monsters, how to level up, the benefits of leveling up to level 10, what happens when you reach level 50, how to advance to the second class, and what the third class consists of. However, there have been no cases of people reaching the fourth class. After reading all the information, he decided to ask more questions at school the next day. Then he thought out loud about how much he missed Lita, and suddenly a voice responded behind him. "You'll be happy to hear what you just said." Yu Ilhan quickly turned around and asked who it was. The voice replied, "I have been sent from the heavens to help you use mana. I am an angel, and my name is Eartha." Yu Ilhan was thoughtful that another intruder had appeared in his life, a second angel. Eartha starts by telling Yu Ilhan that she was sent because another angel asked for him. It wasn't fair to abandon a human who could only train physically. Yu Ilhan asks if it was Lita, and Eartha responds that it was. He asks why she didn't come to help him, and Eartha explains that the higher-ups were worried that an angel and a human would get too close, so they didn't send her. He understands and Eartha scans him, telling him that there is something different about his physical ability level. She says that there was no need for an angel to take care of him, as he could easily defeat a low-level monster with his fist. We see a flashback of Lita praying and crying, saying that he was a human without mana, who had been alone for 1,000 years, and that she was worried about him. Eartha tells him that Lita manipulated them and is not an innocent angel, but she has learned her lesson and has been given the mission. She tells him that she is there only to support him, so he can learn to use mana easily. Ilhan asks how he can use mana, and she tells him that just having her by his side will activate the mana within him, as she is a superior being. According to her calculations, he will be ready in 1 year. He asks if she will stay with him all the time, and she tells him that she has a spell to prevent inferior beings from seeing her. He asks her to respect his privacy and leave him alone when he showers or goes to the bathroom. The next day, we see the protagonist walking with Eartha, who is very small due to the spell and can't be seen by anyone. Ilhan asks if she will be on his head all day and to please not move so much, as it's uncomfortable. But Eartha tells him to be quiet. As they walk, a group of soldiers pass by, as the government has prepared them against any monsters that may appear in the future. However, Ilhan remembers that Lita told him that monsters could not be defeated with high-impact weapons. In the classroom, no one notices Ilhan's presence. He laments his stealth ability, but Eartha tells him that it's not a bad ability, on the contrary, it's a good one. However, Ilhan believes that it's a skill for losers. Eartha explains that, for example, if you combined all the beings in the classroom, their power would be less than the power of stealth. She emphasizes that despite what he thinks, it's not a bad ability. Ilhan resigns himself and thinks that at least he can listen to conversations without anyone noticing and gather information. He overhears some classmates talking about a girl named the Empress, and Ilhan realizes that the Empress was very famous in one of the worlds during the 10 years and was apparently a student at that university. Other students also had a conversation wondering when a dungeon would appear. Our protagonist asks Eartha about what a dungeon is, and she explains that they are traps that God sets by putting food in the dungeons to attract monsters, and once they are there, he blocks them so that they cannot escape. However, depending on their level, some humans can enter and exit if they meet the required level and destroy the monsters. Ilhan asks why they don't leave the monsters there and solve the problem. Eartha responds that dungeons disappear after a certain time, so the monsters can't stay there. She also explains that some monsters are smarter and don't get trapped in dungeons, some are powerful enough to break traps, and some can create more traps and disguise themselves. Therefore, she recommends that he never let his guard down. Later, the teacher begins his class on the importance of adapting to this new society, the regulations and guidelines for the use of mana. But Ilhan is bored and thinks that having a degree is not as important as being able to use mana. He is interrupted by Eartha, who tells him that the most efficient way to train mana is by hunting monsters. However, Ilhan doesn't want to do anything dangerous, but Eartha explains that they are still in the initial phase of the Great Cataclysm, and some monsters are weak, and he needs to hunt many weak monsters to increase his experience and level to train his mana. But Ilhan explains that he is only level 1 and can't even use mana like others. Eartha tells him that he has a very good physique, even capable of easily defeating level 25 monsters. He is surprised, and she tells him they can test it right now. At that moment, all the classmates are looking out the window at some giant insects outside the school. Eartha tells the protagonist that the tutorial is over and that humanity now has to defend itself. Most people are thinking about what to do, where to go, where the military is to protect them, but in the classroom, all the students are only thinking about running away. Minutes later, everyone runs away scared and leaves the protagonist alone. Eartha tells him to take action, that it's time and he can fight them. So he decides to make several weapons with the desks in the classroom to defeat the monsters. Eartha congratulates him and asks him how he made several weapons so quickly. He responds that he had enough time to learn crafting and many other things. Eartha remembers what Lita said, that Ilhan was alone and didn't know how to do anything. Once he had the weapons ready, he regretted not bringing his lance. The protagonist tells Eartha that he wants to hide his identity from other people, so he decides to wear a mask. Giant insects appear destroying the city, and then Ilhan appears from the heights wearing only his mask and weapons, and starts attacking with a swift kick from the sky, hitting the insects. One by one, he destroys them, and with each insect destroyed, his experience levels increase. He receives notifications that his skills are evolving, and he realizes that this is the way to quickly level up. He also discovers that by claiming the life of each opponent, he can gain more strength and increase his power. His mana level also increases during the fight. During the battle, Ilhan is surrounded by a group of giant insects, but he takes advantage of the moment and restarts the fight, attacking with lightning-fast punches and kicks, quickly annihilating all the insects. Eartha guides and advises him on how to attack, making him even more effective. With each movement, he becomes more lethal, gaining experience and leveling up rapidly. Eartha advises him to always be active, and more giant insects continue to appear. But Yu-Il-hun is not afraid and becomes even more confident in his abilities. He moves at great speed, cutting through the monsters and destroying each one in his path. During the fight, a giant mosquito hits him with its stinger, but Yu-Il-hun remains unharmed, and the mosquito's stinger shatters when it hits him. Eartha realizes that the protagonist's skin is tough due to the extreme training he did during all those years, allowing him to surpass the limits of a human. Yu-Il-hun makes a precise strike and annihilates the mosquito. Despite having destroyed several monsters, more reinforcements keep coming, and Eartha warns him to be careful. Yu-Il-hun finds himself surrounded by a large group of insect-like monsters, but with great confidence he takes his weapons and exclaims, "It's time to exterminate bugs." With agile movements and the use of his homemade weapons, he explodes the bugs, gaining experience, endurance, strength, and mana. Later, Yu-Il-hun is surprised by cosmic rays that destroy other insects. When he turns around, he sees a young woman with long hair and a gem on her forehead. She emits these rays with just one hand, and Yu-Il-hun wonders who this unknown woman is and thinks she may be a mage. However, Eartha interrupts him and tells him not to lose concentration and to continue killing the monsters. They destroy the insects between the unknown woman and Yu-Il-hun, and Eartha tells him that the unknown woman has a huge mana level since she can generate lightning attacks very quickly. Finally, Yu-Il-hun annihilates the last monster, which gives him a high level of experience. After the epic battle, people slowly begin to come out of hiding, and they are amazed and happy. Yu-Il-hun is a little exhausted. A few minutes later, the military arrives and explains that they could not arrive earlier because their vehicle had crashed. They are surprised to find all the monsters dead. Eartha guides the protagonist to examine the insides of one of the insect-type monster corpses to find a mana stone, which can be used as basic material for better artifacts. When Yu-Il-hun breaks the toughest part of the exoskeleton, he reaches the maximum level of slaughter. The military is amazed at Yu-Il-hun, wondering who he is, what his level is, and how he is so strong. People approach Yu-Il-hun and take pictures, and he feels a bit embarrassed because he is not used to people interacting with him. However, no one will recognize him because he still wears his mask. The unknown woman approaches him and asks if he can help with the killing. And so, Yu-Il-hun met the Empress for the first time. The Empress asks Yu-Il-hun to please butcher the monsters for her, and if he could do it for her, since she saw him do it before. He asks how much she will give him, remembering that when monsters are butchered, they can obtain mana stones. She offers him 30% and then corrects herself and offers 40%. Yu-Il-hun happily accepts the deal and begins to gut the monsters. As he does so, he overhears people in the crowd talking about what happened. Some say that the Empress is impressive as she can control the use of mana, and others tell stories like if you get too close to her, you can get struck by lightning. Yu-Il-hun continues to think while hearing people talk about him, saying things like apparently he shoots lightning. And Yu-Il-hun thinks that he does not do that, it was just the Empress. Others say that he killed monsters with his laser sabers, but Yu-Il-hun knows they are just javelins, and he would actually like to have something like that. Some say they saw him using an axe, but the protagonist thinks to himself that it's just javelins and he has them in his hand. After he finishes, Eartha tells him that his stealth ability is great and he can do whatever he wants with the mask, and no one will remember him. He suddenly feels sad and says that he wishes people would at least notice he is there. In one of the monster's entrails, he finds a precious gem and gives it to the Empress. Once he finishes gutting the monsters, he says goodbye. But before leaving, one of the military personnel asks him if he can cooperate. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning strikes this lieutenant, and it was sent by the Empress. Then Yu-Il-hun takes a bag with his obtained gems and decides to leave quickly before things get out of control. However, Eartha explains to him that he shouldn't worry, as his ability to remain unnoticed will keep him safe. In fact, as Yu-Il-hun takes a few steps, people look around surprised, wondering where he went. He tries to signal and greet them, but it doesn't work. His stealth ability works as always, and everyone thinks he quickly fled in a moment of distraction. He insists on trying to get their attention, but it doesn't work. He feels a little sad and confused, torn between wanting recognition and staying unnoticed. Eartha encourages him not to worry. As night falls, we see the protagonist sitting in a park. Eartha asks him what he wants to do, and he responds that he's going to try to make a defensive armor using his intuition. But he considers it a little difficult, so he'll at least make some wrist and knee guards. It's true, Eartha explains, that it's a bit difficult to handle the products obtained from monsters, and it's necessary to find a true master to do it. Yu Ilhan proudly tells her that he's a true master of the earth. Eartha remembers Lita, who cried inconsolably because the protagonist supposedly didn't know how to do anything and begged for mercy. She then exclaims Lita's name. Yu Ilhan, upon hearing her say the name, smiles in embarrassment and asks if she misses her too. Eartha responds that she really does miss her, while also having the image in her head of hanging her for all the lies she has told about Yu Ilhan, as she has been a very manipulative angel. Eartha watches the protagonist as he tries to find a way to make armor, then asks if he knows anything about mana craftsmanship. He replies that he doesn't, but he's very motivated to learn it. He asks her to please teach him this new skill, as he likes learning new abilities. She tells him that she'll teach him, but to take it easy and not put too much pressure on himself. Yu Ilhan feels a little embarrassed for being so intense. The class begins and Eartha explains that mana craftsmanship involves using mana crystals, which are similar to magical stones that allow you to create artifacts that can give special powers to things like armors and weapons, which is related to blacksmithing. Yu Ilhan interrupts Eartha, asking her to teach him faster. As he's very intense, she slaps him to calm him down. The class continues, and Eartha explains that to begin with, in mana craftsmanship, you need to prepare the materials and the magic stones to create armor or mana crystals with properties similar to stones. Yu Ilhan asks her how to do that, and she gives him an example. For something like a dragon's heart, you place the magic stone next to you and synchronize with it while creating the equipment. Once finished, grind the magic stone finely and rub it over the surface of the gear. That's the basic way, which will improve the performance of the weapon or gear. But above the basic way, there's the applied way of mana craftsmanship that grants additional special abilities. She concludes by telling him that the applied way is very difficult, and he won't be able to do it with his current mana. As Yu Ilhan is known for being constant and persevering, he asks Eartha to explain it to him anyway. Despite his stubbornness, she agrees and tells him that to grant special abilities, a master must know how to control mana. Additionally, if they consume mana or magic stones, they could create the desired equipment with abilities like ice or fire. The quality of the stones, the master's mana, and their will are all important when granting abilities. The protagonist thinks about everything Eartha has explained to him and decides to start since he hasn't tried it before. He quickly creates some protectors, then starts to release the ground magic stone dust. Eartha is surprised at how quickly Yu Ilhan learns and thinks that he could develop great power. She congratulates him for building a defensive armor and asks him what he'll do next. He replies that he's not finished yet, that he still has one magic stone. He concentrates and tries to use the mana from the magic stone, and for a moment, a praying mantis scythe appears. But as he doesn't have enough mana, the stone begins to break. Eartha realizes that he almost succeeded and gives him some of her mana. A beautiful stone forms in Yu Ilhan's palm and begins to shine more and more as seconds pass. Eartha thinks he has failed, but we see that he slowly managed to fuse the mantis scythe ability to his wrist protector. Eartha is surprised but congratulates him since he succeeded on his first try and only with a little help of mana she gave him. She asks him what he'll do next, and he replies that he'll run away since, during the weapon creation process, he broke one of the swings. At another time, a reporter appears on television talking in the news about the two people who disappeared after the monster attack. It can be seen that they are the Empress and Yu Ilhan. It's also said that the government is in the process of searching for these citizens with abilities to form a team. The protagonist's mom is worried and tells him to please stay at home. He tells her not to worry, that he's only going to school. However, his mom is concerned and tells him that there are many monsters, that it's very dangerous. Yu Ilhan tells her not to worry, that if he sees anything, he'll run away. His mother is a little more at ease and tells him it's okay, but to be careful. Finally, he says goodbye and tells her he's going to school. Once he's on the street, he feels more comfortable that he's not locked up in his house, but he's a bit uncomfortable that his mom is worrying about him. Eartha, on the other hand, explains that this is a skill that mothers have to worry about their children. She even gives an example that there are penguin moms that can detect their babies crying from a distance, and that's a useful skill for survival. Yu Ilhan, on the other hand, makes a face as he thinks it would be traumatic if his own mom couldn't find him, which had happened with God, who couldn't find him. To change the subject, Eartha talks about what they saw in the news and wants to know what he thinks about the government creating a unit of ability users. The protagonist replies that he's not interested, that his family comes first, and he doesn't trust working with the government. She doesn't criticize him. As they keep walking, he tells her that he wants to see the Empress again. Eartha questions him, asking if it's because he likes her. Yu Ilhan replies that he's not interested, but rather he's surprised by the abilities she has. Eartha teases him, asking if he's not physically attracted to women anymore, perhaps because his physical training was too tough. The protagonist gets annoyed and explains that it's not that he has libido issues, but rather he really isn't interested. The reason is Lita. She makes fun of him, but he evades the subject and explains that he wants to see the Empress because he's curious about her ability to use mana. He remembers some moments when the Empress would shoot lightning bolts quickly. Suddenly, Eartha interrupts the conversation, saying that she feels the presence of a pack of monsters, wolves and wild dogs led by a level 35 wolf. Yu Ilhan is intimidated, saying that there are many and the leader has a high level. He questions her, saying that according to high-level monsters, they don't appear so quickly. She explains that she didn't want to reveal her concerns to an inferior being. The protagonist remembers Lita and establishes the comparison, knowing that Eartha gives the impression of establishing a line between superior and inferior beings, whereas Lita was loving, and he misses her. Eartha interrupts his thoughts and is honest with him, saying that the Earth is not in a normal state and she needs his help. Later we see the protagonist heading towards the site where the pack of wolves is located. Along the way, Eartha explains to him that God transported all of humanity before the Great Cataclysm and sent them to train in using mana. However, he left the animals on Earth, thinking that they would be fine for the planned 10 years. But due to an unknown error, the flow of time on Earth was distorted, and the 10 years in other worlds became 1,000 years on Earth. Yu Ilhan is surprised to learn that he spent so much time only in the company of Lita. Continuing with the explanation. Even though time was reset, the animals that were supposed to live for only 10 years lived for 1,000 years, undergoing a drastic change. In summary, the monsters of the Earth are stronger than those of other worlds, and the Earth needs his help. Eartha tells him that the heavens are making a move to restore balance, but in the meantime, he must destroy the monsters, and of course, he will be rewarded by the superior beings. Minutes later, we see the protagonist on the roof of a building observing the pack. He exclaims that it's a tough and problematic task, and that's why he loves it because he likes challenges. With these words, Yu Ilhan launches his attack with his spear, hitting and finishing off several wolves. As he eliminates monsters, he gains experience levels and increases his stats in various areas. Eartha is surprised to see him in action, eliminating monster threats second by second. People begin to flee the site when they realize the presence of the wolves and wild dogs. Some people try to use the skills they've learned, but they don't have enough mana. They can only ask for help, and our hero, the protagonist, appears at the opportune moment, launching fast attacks to kill the monsters. Even one of the people, with a beast about to kill him, is saved as the protagonist tears the beast apart and leaves it on the ground. The notifications arrive to the protagonist, who must choose a class in order to continue leveling up. At the same time, people recognize him as the masked man who was involved in the previous incident. Eartha congratulates him, telling him that he already has fans. Without paying much attention, he continues to eliminate the fierce beasts. During the battles, he realizes that he is not leveling up because he has not selected a class. Before he can understand the message, one of the wolves lets out a powerful howl, and quickly Yu Ilhan finds himself surrounded by several wolves armed only with his spear. Without much thought, he decides to advance towards the beasts, leaving a trail of blood as he beheads them one by one. With each kill, he gains more experience and becomes stronger, and he emerges victorious and unscathed. The people who are watching are amazed by his feats, but they do not notice that a wolf is heading towards them with a person in its claws. The audience waits to see what the protagonist will do, and with a swift movement, he beheads the wolf, freeing the hostage and gaining more experience. Minutes later, he decides to drop his spear as part of a plan to make the beasts think he has lost it. The beasts launch themselves at him, but with his bare fists, he knocks out one of the wolves, using the combat techniques he learned from Lita. Punches and kicks are his weapons as he eliminates the monsters one by one. Eartha watches in amazement as Yu Ilhan exterminates the wolves with just his training. The excited people admire his skills and strength. With a final karate blow, he eliminates the last beast. As the fierce battle ends, the military arrives on the scene and points their weapons at the protagonist, who is surprised. The rest of the people boo the military, explaining that he is a hero. A lieutenant arrives seconds later and demands that they lower their weapons, explaining that it was all a misunderstanding. After cordoning off the area, the lieutenant explains to Yu Ilhan that they had pointed their weapons because they thought there were still monsters in the area. During the conversation, Yu Ilhan uses his stealth ability to disappear and proceeds to butcher the bodies of the beasts. The lieutenant sees him again and invites him to work with the army, but he refuses. Suddenly, one of the beasts rises and Yu Ilhan annihilates it using only his hands. Later, we see the lieutenant disappointed that the protagonist did not accept the proposal. However, he approaches her and offers to sell the bodies of the beasts to her, knowing that the corpses are useful and that he could make some money. Later, the lieutenant receives a call from her superiors, ordering her to bring Yu Ilhan in. She explains that he does not want to come, but they insist that she must use any means necessary to capture him. After the call ends, Yu Ilhan appears, requesting that the money be paid in cash. He also finds some mana stone crops and asks Eartha if he can eat them, but she warns him that it could be very dangerous. Later, the lieutenant appears with a large sum of money in a briefcase. Eartha suggests that it is too much money and that they only want to establish an alliance with him. After handing over the money, the lieutenant tries to seduce him, but he ignores her. To divert attention, the protagonist presses a button and many flashlights go off, allowing him to escape stealthily. While walking, Eartha tells him that there is one more day before the heavens begin to investigate properly. The protagonist leaves, meditating that his day has just begun and it will probably be very long. A few blocks later, we see Yu Ilhan checking the options menu to choose and gain his first class. Among the options he sees are Lancer, Fighter, Swordsman, Blacksmith, Squire, Hunter, and even Assassin. He has 23 options in total. Among all these options, the protagonist asks Eartha if she has any recommendations. After a pause, she recommends that he become a Lancer since he can use his spear, or a Fighter since he has trained in both skills. The protagonist remembers when he was training with Lita, and she recommended that he start with spears. He has a flashback in which he remembers every time he fought with Lita and ended up getting beaten up, but she congratulated him for lasting at least 3 minutes. Now he is grateful for all the beatings he received from Lita because they made him stronger. However, Eartha explains that he doesn't need to worry about the choice, as he can obtain second and third classes as he levels up. The protagonist becomes frustrated because he didn't read that kind of information on the internet, but she simply responds that social media is a waste of time. After much deliberation, the protagonist finally chooses the Lancer option, as he believes it will give him better destructive power. Eartha congratulates him on his choice, suggesting that he will be able to create better spears as he finds different materials. After the selection, Yu Ilhan asks Eartha what Fuzzy Lancer means. She explains that it is a modification since it is a unique type of work. He asks her what she means by unique work, and she replies that it means it is a class only for one person, and depends on all the paths and experiences they have gone through, and the records obtained from all battles, unlocking that unique type of class. Eartha, annoyed, tells him to choose it without hesitation, as having a unique job means being specialized to be the best, and has higher requirements to level up than other jobs, but it is worth it. Yu Ilhan is convinced and selects the option, and the menu notifies him that he has become a Fuzzy Lancer, increasing his attack power by 10% and other skills that have also been increased. After reading all the benefits received from the chosen class, he notices an option that says Bloody Lancer and wonders why he didn't choose that option and why he ended up with a Fuzzy Lancer. While discussing with Eartha which option he should have chosen, his body begins to transform and gain more muscle mass, transforming his body. Eartha explains that his body has been strengthened because he gained his first class, and once he has chosen a type of class, he cannot go back. He also asks if he gained any abilities, but he replies that he did not. She reassures him, explaining that most people don't gain abilities at first, but possibly when he does his first and second job, the records accumulate, providing him with a very strong ability in his third job. Eartha silently reflects on the reasons why he may not have received abilities, concluding that possibly in his third job, he will gain an extraordinary ability. After the conversation and choice, she tells him that it's time to search for monsters and not to worry about the briefcase as she placed an invisibility spell on it. She explains that he should only hunt monsters in his area, and that there are other representatives like him. While they are running, he asks if the Empress was a representative, to which Eartha replies that of course she was, and that he should actually focus on having more jobs than the other representatives to obtain greater rewards. Why in fear for their lives? Next, we see the protagonist attacking the bear with continuous cuts in different parts of its body, and although the bear tries to attack him, Yu Ilhan skillfully dodges its claws with his agile movements. After a moment, the protagonist tries to maximize the potential of his lance, remembering his training with Lita, in which she explained that he should concentrate on focusing all his weight on a single point, without thinking. He practiced so much that he managed to cut a strand of Lita's hair, which was a great achievement against an angel. Having remembered, Yu Ilhan focused on concentrating on one point and launched himself at the beast, focusing on its skull as his chosen point to apply all the power he had. He was able to violently impact the bear and tear its head apart, causing blood to splatter everywhere, and thus the bear fell annihilated on the ground, allowing him to gain a large amount of experience and acquire many benefits, including the critical hit ability. The protagonist is satisfied that his lance withstood the attack and decides to celebrate by starting to check the creature's parts to see what he could find. But to the protagonist's misfortune, the bear, upon its death, decreased in size as it had a gigantism ability that dissipated upon dying. After the fight, Eartha reminds him that every time he fights monsters, it will greatly influence the development of his abilities and his own growth. She also congratulates him and encourages him to continue doing great things and learning more skills. While he was rummaging through the beast, a black vehicle arrives, and some strangers get out, saying that they will take over from that point on. They ask where the monster is, and Eartha tells Yu Ilhan that it seems like other users with abilities have just arrived. Yu Ilhan looks at them with disdain, thinking to himself, what's the point if the fight is already over? Next, the young people who got out of the vehicle are approached by the military, who tell them that everything has already ended. However, they were expecting some fight or exercise since they heard that the monster was a class 2. Then, one of the young people notices that Yu Ilhan is in front of the bear in the process of butchering it, and recognizes him as Sun Gain Bolt. Another young person stares at Yu Ilhan, wondering how he alone could kill the bear, especially since it was only the 4th day of the Great Cataclysm. The group of young people approaches to congratulate the protagonist and ask him various questions, but he doesn't answer or want to talk to anyone. One of them gets upset, but another calms him down, saying that Yu Ilhan probably didn't want to talk to them. Finally, one of the military personnel approaches one of them, telling them that they have work elsewhere, and asking for their support. Yu Ilhan continues with the butchery without paying much attention, but one of them approaches to greet him, introducing himself as Duiujoon and extending his hand. Yu Ilhan ignores him at first, but they start a conversation about the importance of being the strongest, and a debate ensues, with both giving their own point of view. Finally, the protagonist concludes the conversation by telling him that he shouldn't try to be better than anyone else, but only to be the best version of himself. A few moments later, the protagonist couldn't find any magic stones but instead obtained a significant amount of leather from the beast's skin. Then, a military officer approached him and, after giving him a talk, recommended an application that allowed him to see on a map where monsters appeared. Skeptical, Yu Ilhan asked why the officer was providing him with this information, but the lieutenant explained that it was for the benefit of the citizens. As the protagonist walked away, another military officer approached the lieutenant and asked why he didn't try harder to persuade Yu Ilhan to cooperate with them. However, the intelligent lieutenant explained that people like Yu Ilhan shouldn't be controlled but rather learn to coexist and help each other when necessary. Eartha realized this was for the best, as if Yu Ilhan felt obliged to cooperate, he might destroy the entire army just to avoid following orders. After activating the application, the protagonist informed Eartha that he had received 3 monster alerts on the map near his area, and asked what they should do. With a confident smile, she simply replied that he should defeat all 3. Yu Ilhan set off confidently towards the monsters and defeated a rat, a mantis, and a bird, all of which were large creatures. He then regretted only gaining 1 level, and Eartha explained that this was because the 3 monsters were weaker than the wolf and bear he had defeated earlier. She also reminded him that his unique class forced him to acquire more experience. To celebrate, the protagonist proudly told Eartha that he had obtained a large amount of money from the creatures' corpses and could now buy a property. But she interrupted him, suggesting that he risked being discovered if he spent the money too quickly. However, as a gift, she would erase the officer's memories. Upon hearing this, Yu Ilhan was overjoyed and told her she was the best. The next morning, minutes after learning the news, Yu Ilhan calls Eartha to find out what she knows about it, and she explains that the monsters of the earth are becoming stronger and stronger, so the decision was made to send them to another world to gain more experience. Angry, Yu Ilhan complains that he would be left alone again, and she sarcastically responds that he has been alone from the beginning, so what's the difference? He then thinks about the questions his mother will ask him, but Eartha advises him to simply say that there is nothing for him to learn there. She expresses her sympathy for his situation, and he asks if he can go to the other world. She replies that it's not impossible, but he would have to become a higher being. If he can achieve that, he could go to the other world and even to the heavens, since he would be at the same level as the angels. Thinking about this possibility, he wonders if he could see Lita again. Eartha thinks it seems like Lita and Yu Ilhan have a long-distance relationship. She explains that he must train very hard for this to happen, but it could last at least a millennium. With the tenacity that characterizes him, he says he can easily wait that long. Minutes later, it is broadcasted on television that the government has declared a state of emergency, so all schools and businesses will be closed, and people will have to stay in their homes so that the military can hunt down the monsters with the least number of casualties. Then, Yu Ilhan advises his parents to go to the other world, as monsters will continue to appear, and it's better to prepare to become stronger and be able to face them. His father understands and encourages him to become better every day, saying goodbye and teleporting to the other world. His mother starts to say goodbye and give him more advice, but before leaving, she tells him that she knows he is the hero in the mask, that she recognized him on television, and that despite the disguise, a mother always recognizes her child. Before saying goodbye, she advises him not to trust other people and to be cautious in trusting others, and tells him she is proud of him. With tears in his eyes, Yu Ilhan says goodbye to his mother. After she leaves for the other world, he realizes he has to wash the dishes after lunch and remembers that with Lita, he didn't have to wash the dishes. Meanwhile, Eartha tells him that she is heading to the heavens to collect her quest rewards, and Yu Ilhan only asks her to bring back some ice cream when she returns. Later, Yu Ilhan, being alone, goes to a storage unit he bought the night before with the money he has been collecting, and decides that it will be his workshop. Without wasting time, he begins working with the only materials he has, raw leather and bones. Although he doesn't have any metal, he thinks that the bones should be enough to make something. Unfortunately, taking care of the leather and hardening it can take some time, and Yu Ilhan wonders how long it will actually take to finish creating equipment. Then a voice behind him responds that they can take care of that with magic. When he turns around, he realizes it's Eartha. He only asks if she brought ice cream. Suddenly, she uses her magic to grow to her original size, and Yu Ilhan asks if she used some kind of magic to increase her size. She simply responds that she has been using magic since they met, which is why he had seen her in her reduced size. Without wasting any time, Eartha asks Yu Ilhan to give her a hand to give him the reward she had gone to get. When he gives her his hand, he realizes that he has unlocked a level of Heaven's Quest 1, all his stats have increased, and he has been decreed the most successful among the mission participants. So he would receive additional rewards, obtaining the Eternal Flame. Yu Ilhan doesn't know what this means. Eartha points to a nearby furnace where there is a flame, and he says he didn't do it. She explains that it's a flame that will continue to grow and never extinguish. It's a flame of the heavens. That's exactly what I needed, exclaims Yu Ilhan. Eartha responds that she knew it, as it was what Lita had told her. Yu Ilhan excitedly asks about Lita. Eartha tells him that she was very worried about him from the heavens. Yu Ilhan sighs excitedly to have news about Lita and exclaims that she really understands what he needs. Eartha also tells him that she has good news, as the heavens have assigned her another mission. Since he can't go to the other world, Yu Ilhan asks her what this mission consists of. She explains that he must create a dungeon on Earth. Yu Ilhan thinks about how he will be able to create a dungeon, so he gets a little nervous and offers her something to eat to change the subject. But she interrupts him, saying that the heavens gave him that mission. After the conversation, Yu Ilhan complains to Eartha, saying that the plans they've been given never end well. Eartha gives an explanation that doesn't satisfy Yu Ilhan, and after discussing the matter, she explains that he has developed amazing skills in tool forging during his training, which is why he is the only person capable of building a dungeon on Earth and why he has been chosen. Yu Ilhan gets upset, saying that he doesn't want to do the mission. However, he realizes that she is flattering him, which is very suspicious, so he accuses her of saying positive things about him because she knows it's an extremely difficult task. She tells him that they all win, they follow orders, and he gets the reward for his efforts. Yu Ilhan asks what happens if he doesn't do the task, and Eartha responds that the monsters will have nowhere to go and humanity will suffer as a result. Resigned, Yu Ilhan is given the plans, a series of magic stones, and 3 strange metals that are only used by higher beings and are not available on Earth. Eartha tells him he can use the tools she has brought him, and Yu Ilhan is very happy and excited to be able to use them. But Eartha clarifies that he must return the tools once the mission is over, as it is only a loan. Yu Ilhan starts examining the tools, trying to figure out how to use them correctly, but Eartha interrupts him, indicating that he only needs to create magic tools to attract the monsters. She shows him the plan for creating the Trap of Perdition, knowing it won't be easy, but also knowing he will have an excellent reward. With that said, Yu Ilhan gets to work, putting on his uniform. He starts by using the Eternal Flame and placing some magic stones to increase its power. Yu Ilhan continues working, trying to forge the trap, while thinking that he may have made a mistake by using the stones on the flame. Eartha watches him work, and after a while, he manages to create a basic shape and tells Eartha that he's a little nervous, asking her not to blame him if he fails. She tells him that if he fails, she'll just melt it and he can start over, but it will just take a lot of time. However, a few minutes later, Yu Ilhan is super focused on developing the cube, and Eartha watches as he works, understanding why Lita started to feel something for Yu Ilhan after watching him for a millennium. Finally, Yu Ilhan puts one of the tools on the table and exclaims aloud that it's finished. Eartha, surprised, asks if he really finished, and immediately, the unlocked abilities appear in the menu, and the cube begins to glow in his hands. After finishing the cube, Yu Ilhan hands it over to Eartha for review. She tells him it's very well done, and even thinks it's perfect despite being created by a human. Yu Ilhan is very pleased with the praise, and Eartha explains that it's time for Minecraft. She would call some of her angelic colleagues to help with the task. Yu Ilhan immediately asks if Lita is among them, but Eartha responds that she is not. After a few seconds, Eartha uses the ring that the angels possess to summon the others. Upon their arrival, they think that Yu Ilhan has completed the dungeon quickly. Eartha hurries them to begin the process, then gives some stones to Yu Ilhan and explains that he needs to establish his will to complete the destruction trap, after which they will take care of the rest. The three angels simultaneously touch Yu Ilhan to give him the energy he needs. He begins to feel the mana that is pressing on his body. The angels explain that this is the power of higher beings, and every second, Yu Ilhan tries to concentrate to channel the energy. He is building a trap to bring in monsters, and time passes as the angels realize that he is truly a human with surprising abilities. One of the angels even feels like he is going to faint, while another thinks that Yu Ilhan is an amazing being. Finally, the terrestrial destruction trap is completed, and the angels are surprised that Yu Ilhan was able to achieve it on the first try. They thought he would fail several times, even though the alpha and beta options were added to the trap. Yu Ilhan asks what these options are, and Eartha explains that they are additional properties that result from the Minecraft smith's work and appear at random depending on the luck of the materials and the artisan's skills. This is unusual, especially for them to be attached to the first work. The angels congratulate him on his achievement and tell him that it's time to set up the dungeon. Eartha asks if he wants to see the trap's activation, and Yu Ilhan happily accepts the invitation. Moments later, we see the angels flying and carrying Yu Ilhan as they head to the site. They make certain jokes, reminding him that he was the only one forgotten by the gods, which he doesn't find very funny. Upon arriving at the designated location, Eartha takes the cube and throws it into the air. Yu Ilhan asks what has happened, and one of the angels responds not to worry, as it's part of the plan. In another location, we see the military amazed as some of the monsters they are attacking begin to change their behavior. Some stop moving, and others change direction. Eartha says that dungeons in other places have started to activate, and Yu Ilhan asks how that's possible if they were obsolete, as she had told him. But one of the angels explains that what happened was that he added a spell to the destruction trap that changed the energy of other terrestrial dungeons. Changing the subject, one of the angels asks Eartha and Yu Ilhan if they were really close, and they both admit that they weren't. Gradually, the monsters start moving towards the trap. And in a kind of flashback, Yu Ilhan remembers everything he went through and how he was forgotten for 1,000 years. But thanks to what he's doing now, he knows that it wasn't a mistake and that he wouldn't have been able to survive all those years without Lita's company, who he currently misses a lot. That's why he wants to become stronger so that no one can control him and he can seek his own freedom. The next day, Yu Ilhan is eating in front of the TV, watching the news report that dungeon functions have been activated in various places. After eating, he washes his dishes and thinks about when he'll see his parents again. Eartha interrupts his thoughts, telling him that the dungeons are working properly without any problems and congratulating him. He then asks her if it's still necessary to build the 27 additional traps that she had requested at first and wonders why the angels have left when there is still work to be done. She explains that building the destruction trap requires a large amount of mana, and they need at least 2 days to recover. Yu Ilhan then asks if they are the only angels and mentions Lita, for example. Eartha responds that there are many, but she can't come to Earth temporarily because she is doing other tasks to ensure things run smoothly. Disappointed, Yu Ilhan laments that she can't come, and after the conversation ends, he decides to go to the workshop to start with the foundations. And so they walk and talk about different topics until they finally reach Yu Ilhan's workshop. He prepares to make some traps for the next day, and before he begins, Eartha congratulates him on the results he has achieved and gives him a compensatory gift. She also assures him that when she gives him the gift, he won't have time to make the traps. He wonders what the gift could be until she shows him the cured leather of the monster that he didn't know how long would last. He was delighted with the gift, and she was satisfied with the gift she had given him. Yu Ilhan begins by making some gloves and boots, and with each modification he makes to the suit, he unlocks new abilities and develops new alternatives to optimize the armor. Eartha watches him in amazement as he excellently handles strengthening techniques. Then he uses the bear skin to create armor, and a day passes while Yu Ilhan continues to work. Eartha suggests he rest, but he tells her he's not tired and that he's almost done. She stays by his side watching his progress, and then Yu Il-hun manages to unlock the power of defense and durability in the armor. He is very happy with the work he has done, but he still has some bones left as material, and he decides to add them to the suit, unlocking hidden functions such as releasing sharp spikes as a means of counterattack if he receives damage, like a porcupine. Eartha remembers that one of her bracelet's weapons looked like a retractable manta claw, so she asks him why he likes to hide jumping blades. Yu Il-hun just replies that he likes it because he's a man. Eartha also detects that the alpha and beta options have been enabled in the armor. Yu Il-hun realizes that he still has some bones left and uses them to create some knives to make it easier for him to do butchery work. With each object he makes, he obtains significant improvements, and he finishes by making a mask with the skull of one of the wolves. After finishing his work, Yu Il-hun dresses in everything he has built, including the new mask. As he admires his outfit, loud noises are heard outside, and Eartha warns him that the sound is of someone fighting monsters. When they look out, they see people inside a building screaming that a large second-class monster has appeared. Eartha finds it strange that there are still monsters that have not been caught by the dungeons. Yu Il-hun tells her that he hopes the beast is much weaker. She questions him, asking if he's afraid, but he replies that he's not. He just knows that if the monster is stronger, he will have to take its leather and make a new armor. Before going out to fight, Yu Il-hun modifies his spear to make it a fatally sharp steel spear, whose attack powers, durability, and additional bonuses make it amazing. Out in the streets, Yu Il-hun goes down different roads until he finds the monster, a giant leopard that not even the anti-tank rockets the military is using can destroy. He decides to take action. Yu Il-hun puts on his mask and begins the attack. Eartha realizes that the leopard is much stronger than the bear. While Yu Il-hun approaches the beast, one of the military tanks fires a missile that hits the animal's face. They think it was a successful shot, but it didn't hurt the beast at all. The leopard heads towards the tank and is about to bite it when Yu Il-hun appears from the air, wielding his spear and aiming directly for the jaguar's eye, which he hits with a critical blow. All the people in the audience begin to celebrate that Sungai and Bolt did not abandon them and are happy that he did not go to the other world. The leopard, injured in one eye, is still alive. The military fires and uses all their armaments, but the leopard resists without much difficulty. The monster throws a tank in the air, but Yu Il-hun, with a swift movement, manages to rescue the soldiers who were operating it, leaving them in a safe place. Yu Il-hun then stands in front of the giant beast, and Eartha warns him to be very careful because the leopard has detected him, and his stealth ability won't work. But Yu Il-hun, with his increased confidence, tells her not to worry. He knows he can defeat the opponent by fighting head-on. But together before starting the attack, the military intervenes and begins shooting at the beast. The people around also want to help Yu Il-hun, but suddenly a lightning bolt strikes the beast from the sky. The people search for where the lightning came from, and from a helicopter, they can see the Empress who had arrived to help. However, the leopard is still alive, so Yu Il-hun launches a direct attack on the leopard's face, while all the people watch in amazement, even the Empress from the helicopter. When Yu Il-hun is about to hit the giant beast, he activates the armor's ability, causing many sharp spikes to sprout around the armor. For this reason, he is proud of his invention, as it fulfills the function he desired. As the minutes pass, Yu Il-hun continues to make accurate attacks on the beast, which gradually bleeds out. Yu Il-hun moves at great speed, so much so that even Eartha warns him that she feels like vomiting. The giant leopard tries to escape, destroying everything in its path and even attacking Yu Il-hun, but he, with his super speed and dexterity, manages to dodge every blow. In a counterattack, he activates the critical hit, severely injuring the beast. People realize that the beast is weakening, and so do the military, so they begin shooting again, and people from the streets try to help Yu Il-hun by attacking with their rudimentary weapons. Finally, the gigantic creature falls unconscious on the ground, and Yu Il-hun thinks it's over, but the leopard begins to mutate to a third class. Yu Il-hun is surprised by what is happening, and immediately tentacles begin to sprout from its wounds. Yu Il-hun realizes that the evolution to the third class has not yet been completed, so he must take the opportunity to destroy it. Timely, a lightning bolt strikes the beast, sent by the Empress who is trying to help Yu Il-hun. She explains that the attacks will not be enough because the level of the beast is very high, and no matter how many cuts they make, tentacles keep coming out. They must do as much damage as possible so that it cannot regenerate. The Empress shouts that she has buff magic. He asks her what the buff consists of, and she only says that if she uses it, her mana will be depleted, but he can take advantage of it to do more damage. Therefore, she will transfer it to him, and with that power, he can finish off the beast. She jumps from the helicopter without thinking and lands where Yu Il-hun is. She explains that she must be in physical contact to give him the buff, and once transmitted, she won't be of much help, so she entrusts her life to him. And so, the Empress begins the process, and Yu Ilhan begins to acquire abilities that increase his attack power, movement speed, and critical hit probability by 50% for only 30 seconds. But after the effect ends, all his abilities will be reduced by half for 3 minutes. Eartha wonders how a human can retain mana to be able to attack and have a buff, while Yu Ilhan begins to feel the energy and the improvements. The Empress warns him that if he fails to kill the beast, the military will use missiles that could cause significant casualties and damage. With all the power given to him by the Empress, Yu Ilhan manages to deliver a critical hit and a lightning strike that are devastating, ending the beast. He gains a great deal of experience and sets a record for eliminating a level 87 leopard. Eartha congratulates him on exterminating the beast before it evolved to the 3rd class. The Empress asks Yu Ilhan if the leopard is really dead, and he replies that it is, and that he has even increased his experience level. She responds that she has not because she is part of a group with him. Yu Ilhan is unaware that there is a system for groups in which all participants can receive shared benefits from the experience gained. The protagonist sadly retires as he was unaware of that modality. While he is leaving, 3 minutes pass and his statistics are reduced by half. Eartha saves him as the beast almost falls on top of him. After the battle, we see our protagonist on top of the beast while the people present applaud and celebrate his victory. However, he is not happy. Eartha asks him why he is not content since he won, but he replies that due to the multiple injuries he received, he will not be able to carry out the new armor with the leopard skin. Some people approach the beast, which has started to decrease in size. The people in the area want to try to butcher it, but the protagonist interrupts them. The Empress approaches, and he asks her what the percentage will be. She replies that 60% is for him, 20% is for her, and 20% is for the rest of the people. Since the protagonist already knows his commission, he jumps and breaks the leopard's head, obtaining a 2nd-class mana stone. Once obtained, he asks the Empress how much it could be worth, and she responds that it is equivalent to the agreed-upon 60%. But the rest of the people do not agree, as they consider that they also helped. So, as everyone complains, an idea occurs to him to follow his mother's advice to resolve conflicts with fists and not words. He faces the public and tells them that if he does not receive his agreed commission, there will be many problems. Everyone feels embarrassed and intimidated and tells him to keep the stone. A few moments later, the Empress approaches our protagonist and proposes a deal. If he can butcher the beast, she will give him an additional 40% of the leather. He immediately accepts, and when he finishes, the Empress calls to arrange transportation for the materials obtained. Then, the people timidly approach him and ask for his help in distributing their share. Eartha tells the protagonist that humans are hopeless. First, they complained when he took the mana stone, and now they ask for his help. To avoid having to help them, the protagonist asks for 50%. They become upset because he did the same thing for the Empress for only 40%, but they agree anyway. During the process, they only complain that the measurements are not equal and that the size looks different. Our obstinate protagonist runs away from the place. However, he is detected by the Empress, who despite his stealth ability, tells him that she wants to form a group with him. She says she has not seen another companion like him and that he is not so weak, so she will stay on Earth to carry out difficult missions. She gives him a card with her contact information and says goodbye. Our protagonist checks the card and reads Kang Mirae, which is the Empress's real name, but he ignores it as he has no intention of calling her. Another day, we see our protagonist in his workshop, making new cubes. When he finishes the 5th cube, Eartha tells him that she is worried about what is happening on Earth, as a monster was almost evolving to the 3rd class. But he replies, asking her to ask God. With every comment she makes, he responds to ask God. She complains that he is too calm, despite it being a serious problem, as very few people have barely reached the 1st class level, and now monsters of the 3rd class are starting to appear. She continues explaining that the balance of power is currently tilted towards the monsters, and although humans are increasing their power in other worlds, monsters evolve at a faster rate. But our protagonist responds that it's not that he is calm, but that he can't do anything about it. He also asks her what has happened in other countries, and she responds that South Korea is the only place where monsters have started to evolve to the 3rd class. After that conversation, the protagonist suggests that they may have evolved due to the destruction trap. Eartha thinks that maybe the trap could have been the cause of the monsters feeling the threat, generating an escape and awakening. In summary, monsters are trapped before they awaken, and their evolution occurs in the dungeons. With the crossing of species, new and dangerous beasts can appear, and they can even evolve when they devour each other. The protagonist thinks that it's worse to have them trapped, but Eartha explains that if they were free, they would eat humans instead of other monsters, but that most monsters don't usually fight among themselves, which is why their growth slows down. Our protagonist worries and decides to continue making a destruction trap. Eartha realizes that our protagonist always wants to be doing new things. She knows that being alone for 1,000 years, with the world paralyzed, He became addicted to new experiences and knowledge stimulation. That's why she feels a bit of empathy and motivates him to become stronger so that he can experience things infinitely. At night, the angels return as they had recovered their mana after completing the destruction traps. The angels went to do dungeons in other countries, although the protagonist doesn't know which countries they are heading to. He just hopes that no dangerous monsters appear there. Eartha reassures him, telling him that if a Class 3 monster appears, it won't be his fault. On the contrary, he is doing important work, normalizing Earth's dungeons. He thanks her for her concern and tells her that he is very tired. She tells him to go rest. Hey, if you are enjoying the video, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and hit the notification bell so you get alerted when we upload new videos. When our protagonist arrives home, he gets out of the shower, and upon seeing himself in the mirror, he notices that his body has become bigger with more muscle. Eartha responds with irony, asking if he had only just noticed. As he levels up, he will continue to grow. He tells her that even his face has become more handsome, but Eartha responds that for a superior being, his face is common, but by human standards, he may have become more attractive. Then, the protagonist begins posing like a model in front of her, but she just yells at him for not letting her watch TV. He laughs and tells her he is going to sleep, and she stays behind, eating a bag of potato chips, thinking about what is really inside the protagonist. The next morning, our protagonist receives a notification that he has reached the maximum rest level. Eartha comes in shouting, asking how it's possible that he learned the rest skill, as it's a skill of higher beings and even she hasn't mastered it yet. He explains to her that during the millennium he was alone. He researched how to sleep more comfortably every night. Eartha is once again amazed at his tenacity in researching things to the fullest and putting them into practice. She tells him that the skill is used for resting and sleeping well, but our protagonist suspects there's more to it and confronts her to tell him the truth. Eartha changes her appearance to that of a teacher to explain the evolution of skills. She begins by saying that skill evolution is an achievement that extends the acquisition of skills, similar to a class promotion, and is based on the special records of existence to present a new and superior path. It could be said that it's a guide of the Akashic records. Our protagonist interrupts, asking her to explain in simpler terms. She shows him an example of before and after and how the comparison would look like. The skills that have fulfilled the evolution conditions for our protagonist are Taijutsu, use of the spear, rest, and stealth. However, butchery and blacksmithing don't have another level, meaning they have reached the maximum. Eartha continues with the explanation of the status of his skills taking into account his current level. She tells him to check the evolution conditions he must meet for the rest skill. When he reviews them, our protagonist thinks they're complicated, but Eartha shows him some that are easier. Despite their discussion, she continues to try to motivate him, although she's mentally analyzing certain variables of our protagonist's conditions, coming to the conclusion that, despite his slow evolution in the use and mastery of mana, he's a really strong being thanks to the training he did during the millennium. Despite everything, Eartha thinks about the potential that protagonist has when he masters mana. He could rule the world, but she believes that if someone could rule the world, it would be really dangerous. Days later, the protagonist's mother made him breakfast and left a note about food and monsters. As he starts to eat, he watches the news on TV, which shows images of the aftermath of the attack of the second-class monster that had occurred earlier. The protagonist says it's the plaza where he fought 2 days ago, and Eartha replies that it's the place where he left the giant leopard's corpse, but the news shows the place completely clean. The protagonist is surprised that people distributed the entire body in just 2 days, but Eartha has another theory. They continue to watch the news, which reports that the people who were arguing about how to distribute the remains of the animal have disappeared without a trace, leaving our protagonist completely stunned. The reporter also states that some people think that one of the dungeons was opened and devoured them all together, which makes the protagonist anxious, thinking that it could really have been one of the dungeons. Eartha and the protagonist try to explain what could have happened. First, the giant leopard was definitely dead, and the protagonist had even extracted its mana stone. Eartha explains that maybe the monster was pregnant, trying to recall the moment. The protagonist thinks he may have seen a black-furred leopard for a moment and regrets not properly dismantling the body, which would have prevented anything from happening. Eartha corrects him, saying that it was the humans' greed that was to blame, as they were only concerned with claiming their share and didn't let him do his job. But he feels guilty, thinking that many people died because of him, some of whom he helped and others who believed in him. Eartha looks at him sadly as she sees him feeling down. Then the protagonist explains why the monster fought so hard, as it wanted to hide the existence of the creature. Eartha accepts that possibility and adds that perhaps the offspring has the ability of stealth. As they continue to talk and try to analyze what might have happened, they speculate that perhaps the people arguing over the loot were not paying attention to the mother's corpse, and when the offspring was born, it devoured them. After much thought, the protagonist tells Eartha that it may be time for the first third-class creature, and taking into account the creature's stealth ability, Eartha has no doubt. Our protagonist decides not to wait any longer and decides to take action, knowing that he will have a worthy opponent who, like him, has stealth abilities but surely has weaknesses such as little strength or defense. He quickly dresses to leave and, just in case, decides to call upon the EMPRATRIZ for support. Eartha recommends that he not call her from his mobile device to avoid being identified, so he accepts the suggestion and calls her from a phone booth. When he calls, the EMPRATRIZ only recognizes that it is a public phone number. When our protagonist answers and greets her, she does not recognize his voice and asks who he is. Not knowing what to say, he first thinks to say SUNGAI and bold, the nickname given to him by the other people. Then she recognizes him and asks him the reason for his call, and he explains that it's related to the news and that there's a new and very strong monster with stealth ability. That's all for today's video. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to see more content. Goodbye and see you in the next video.